1. The poetic justice of the bull Piraeus of Athens was a bronze worker in the 6th century BC who sought the patronage of Phalaris, the cruel tyrant of Acragas. To impress the ruler, Piraeus designed a new horrific instrument of torture and execution, the brazen bull. It was a hollow bronze statue of a bull, in which a victim could be locked inside. A fire would be lit beneath it, roasting the person to death. Piraeus had even engineered a system of tubes in the bull's head to convert the victim's screams into what sounded like the bellowing of an enraged bull. When he presented his creation, Phalaris was impressed by the ingenuity, but disgusted by its creator's grim nature. As a demonstration, the tyrant ordered Piraeus to get inside to show him how the acoustics worked. Once he was inside, Phalaris locked the door and lit the fire, making the inventor the first victim of his own gruesome device. 2. A barrel of bad ideas. Karel Susek was a Canadian stuntman who designed a specialized shock-absorbent barrel. In 1984, he successfully used it to go over Niagara Falls, surviving the perilous drop. Emboldened, he planned an even more ambitious stunt for 1985 at the Houston Astrodome. He would be dropped from the rafters 180 feet up into a tank of water. He was supremely confident in his barrel's design. On January 20th, as a packed stadium watched, the barrel was released. But something went terribly wrong. It began to wobble on its descent, and instead of landing squarely in the center of the water tank, it clipped the rim. The impact was devastating. The barrel cracked open, and Sutek was severely injured. He was still alive when rescue crews reached him, reportedly saying, "It's not your fault," but he died from his injuries a short time later. His life-saving invention had failed him at the final, crucial moment. 3. The Iron Coffin. Horace Lawson Hunley, a Confederate Marine engineer, was determined to create a vessel that could break the Union's naval blockade. The result was the H.L. Hunley, a primitive hand-cranked submarine. The vessel was notoriously dangerous, having already sunk twice during testing, killing 13 crew members. Undeterred, Hunley himself decided to oversee a routine training dive in Charleston Harbor on October 15, 1863. With Hunley at the controls and a crew of 7, the submarine submerged. It never resurfaced. For weeks, search efforts found nothing. The Iron Tomb remained lost at the bottom of the harbor for over 130 years. When it was finally raised in 2000, the skeletons of the 8 men were found at their stations. Hunley was still in the forward conning tower, his hand near the controls of the invention that had become his coffin. 4. The Glider King. Otto Lilienthal was a German pioneer of aviation, a man who inspired the Wright brothers with his daring feats. By 1896, he had completed over 2,000 successful flights in his elegant bird-like gliders, launching himself from a hill near Berlin. On August 9th of that year, he was on his 4th flight of the day. He soared gracefully through the air, but a sudden, powerful gust of wind stalled his glider, pitching it forward. Lilienthal was unable to regain control. The glider plummeted roughly 50 feet, crashing to the ground. The impact broke his spine. As he lay paralyzed, his mechanic rushed to his side. He was transported to a clinic, but his injuries were too severe. He died the following day, his famous last words cementing his legacy as a martyr to aviation. Sacrifices must be made. 5. The Final Contraption. Thomas Midgley Jr. was a brilliant but controversial chemist, the man who gave the world 2 of its most environmentally damaging inventions, leaded gasoline and freon, CFCS. The irony of his death, however, was in a third, more personal creation. At age 51, Midgley contracted polio, leaving him severely disabled and bedridden. To maintain his independence, he designed an elaborate system of ropes and motorized pulleys to lift and turn himself in bed. It was a testament to his inventive spirit. On the morning of November 2nd, 1944, his wife found him dead. He had become entangled in the ropes of his own complex contraption. The very device he had created to grant him freedom of movement had accidentally strangled him in his sleep, a bizarre and tragic end for one of history's most impactful inventors. 6. The first aviator's fall. Jean-François Pilatre de Rosier was a French chemistry teacher and a pioneer of flight. In 1783, he became one of the first 2 men to ascend in a hot air balloon. 2 years later, he decided to attempt an even greater feat, crossing the English Channel by air. For this journey, he designed a new, experimental hybrid craft, combining a hydrogen balloon on top and a hot air balloon below. This Rosier balloon was inherently dangerous, placing a flammable gas directly above an open flame. On June 15, 1785, he and his co-pilot lifted off near Boulogne, France. They rose to an altitude of about 1,500 feet when a change in wind direction pushed them back over land. Witnesses then saw the balloon suddenly deflate and plummet to the ground. Both men were killed instantly, making Derazier not just the first man to fly, but also the first man to die in an air crash. 7. The Rocket Man's Test. Max Valier was an Austrian rocketry pioneer and a founding member of Germany's Society for Space Travel. He was obsessed with the idea of spaceflight, famously predicting that rocket-powered travel would circle the Earth in under an hour. He began by building rocket-powered cars, but his true passion was developing liquid-fueled rocket engines. On May 17, 1930, he was in his Berlin laboratory, conducting a test run of a new alcohol-fueled engine. He believed in hands-on work, often making adjustments while the engines were running. During the test, the combustion chamber of the rocket suddenly exploded with catastrophic force. A piece of shrapnel from his own engine struck him in the aorta, killing him almost instantly. He died at his test bench, a martyr to the dawn of the space age he so desperately wanted to usher in. 8. The Flying Tailor. On a cold February morning in 1912, a crowd gathered at the Eiffel Tower to witness a spectacle. Austrian tailor Franz Reichelt stood on the first platform, 187 feet up, clad in a bulky contraption of his own design, a wearable parachute suit. He was convinced his invention would save the lives of pilots. Authorities had given him permission to test it with a dummy, but at the last moment, Reichelt announced he would make the jump himself. His friends and a concerned guard pleaded with him not to, but he was resolute. For a terrifying 40 seconds, he hesitated on the ledge, a dark figure against the Paris sky. Then, he leaped. The crude parachute folded around him almost instantly, and he plummeted like a stone, his body carving a 5-inch deep crater into the frozen ground at the foot of the tower. His final, fatal experiment was captured on film for the world to see. 9. The Off-Road Exit. Jimmy Heselden, a wealthy British businessman and philanthropist, bought the Segway company in 2009. He was a passionate advocate for the two-wheeled personal transporter, believing it had a future far beyond city tours. On September 26, 2010, he was at his country estate in North Yorkshire, taking one of the company's rugged off-road Segway models for a ride. He was navigating a path along the cliffs overlooking the River Wharfe. In a moment of tragic irony, Heselden apparently lost control of the machine while trying to make way for a man walking his dog. He and the Segway tumbled over a 30-foot cliff, falling into the river below. The 62-year-old owner of the Segway company was found dead in the water, killed in an accident involving the very product he had championed. 10. The Machine That Wouldn't Let Go. William Bullock revolutionized the printing industry in 1863 with his invention of the web rotary press. His machine could print on continuous rolls of paper, making printing faster and more efficient than ever before. On April 3, 1867, he was in a Philadelphia newspaper press room making adjustments to one of his newly installed machines. While trying to kick a drive belt onto a pulley, his leg was caught in the mechanism. The powerful machine crushed his leg, mangling it severely. He was rushed to the hospital, but gangrene quickly set in. 9 days later, Bullock died on the operating table during an amputation of the crushed limb. The man who had created a machine to spread information at incredible speed was killed by its raw, mechanical power. 11. The Propeller's Kiss. Aurel Vlaicu was a Romanian inventor and a national hero, one of the pioneers of aviation in his country. In 1913, he was determined to be the first person to fly across the Carpathian Mountains. He took off on September 13th in his self-designed airplane, the Vlaicu 2. The plane was a unique metal monoplane, and Vlaicu was confident in its abilities. As he approached the mountains, he encountered turbulent weather conditions. While fighting to control his aircraft, the plane suddenly stalled and crashed near the town of Câmpina. The official investigation concluded he died from the impact, but a popular and enduring theory, supported by some eyewitnesses, holds a more tragic story. The theory suggests that as the plane went down, Vlaicu, in a desperate attempt to clear a jammed fuel line, leaned out of the cockpit and was struck in the head by his own spinning propeller. 12. The Steam-Powered Ride. Sylvester H. Roper of Massachusetts was an early and brilliant innovator, creating a wide array of inventions. Among his most significant was one of the world's first motorcycles, a steam-powered bicycle he built in 1867. Over the next 3 decades, he continued to refine his creation. On June 1, 1896, at the age of 72, Roper took his latest steam cycle to a velodrome near Boston to demonstrate its speed. He thrilled the crowd, completing several laps and pacing professional cyclists while reaching speeds of 40 miles per hour. Suddenly, his machine began to wobble, and he was thrown from the vehicle, which then crashed. He was found dead at the scene. Initially, it was believed he died from the crash. However, the autopsy revealed a startling truth. Roper had suffered a massive heart attack while riding. The excitement of pushing his own invention to its limits had literally overwhelmed him. 13. The Unbreakable Lighthouse. English engineer Henry Winstanley was immensely proud of his creation, the first Eddystone Rocks lighthouse, completed in 1698. Built to withstand the ferocious storms of the English Channel, it was a marvel of its time. Winstanley was so supremely confident in its strength that he openly expressed his wish to be inside it during the greatest storm there ever was. In November 1703, he got his wish. While he was on the rock performing maintenance, the legendary Great Storm of 1703 descended, one of the most violent tempests in recorded British history. As hurricane-force winds and colossal waves battered the coast, Winstanley and 5 other men were trapped inside his lighthouse. When dawn broke on November 27th, the storm had passed, but where the lighthouse once stood, there was nothing. The sea had completely obliterated the structure, leaving only a few twisted iron stanchions. Winstanley's creation and its creator were gone forever.